Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. It is so good to see you all again. And if you're new here, then a very warm Mel's Yarniverse welcome to you. Well, if you're anything like me, you've probably got a bunch of these mysterious labelless skeins all strewn throughout your yarn stash. Maybe they've been gifted to you from friends and family, or perhaps like me, you like digging around inside thrift stores and op shops to find the perfect yarn bargain. But once you bring the yarn home, you realise there's absolutely no labels on any of this yarn. So how are you supposed to know exactly what they're made of, how much you've got, and what kind of gauge the yarn is? Well, put your feet up, grab a nice hot cuppa or a nice cold drink, and let me tell you how to identify your yarn. So in today's video, I'm going to take you through 3 simple tests that you can do to help give you more information about the yarn that you're working with. We're going to identify the fibre content of the yarn. We're going to look at the weight or gauge of the yarn. What ply is it? Is it 8 ply, 10 ply? Is it DK, worsted or Aran weight yarn? And lastly, I'm going to show you how to calculate exactly how much yarn you have left in a skein so you can move forward and start planning your next project. Test number 1 is going to help us identify the fibre content or the makeup of our yarn. All yarns fall into 2 different categories, natural or synthetic. Synthetic yarns like acrylic, nylon and polyester are made using man-made fibres. Natural yarns, on the other hand, either come from plants or animals. Some of the plant-based options include cotton, linen and bamboo, whereas animal-based fibres normally fall under the umbrella of wool. The wool can come from sheep, goats, alpacas and even rabbits. So how are we going to identify the fibre content of our yarn? Well, we're going to set it on fire, of course. Test number 1, the burn test. Now, there are 4 key things we need to watch for when we're conducting the burn test. We need to look at how the yarn behaves when it's approaching the flame. We need to look at what it's doing while it's actually burning. We need to look at what's been left behind once it's been extinguished. And we also need to pay attention to the smell of the burnt yarn. So what we're going to do now is head outside and conduct the burn test. We're going to observe how the yarn behaves both approaching the flame and while it's burning. We're going to look at what happens after it's burnt and what we can smell. Then we're going to come inside and compare those results to this burn test chart. As you can see, there's quite a long list of fibres here. We can see what we need to look for when these fibres are approaching the flame, when they're in the flame, once they're removed from the flame, what sort of odour you might be smelling, and what kind of ash is left behind. Now, this chart will be made available as a downloadable file for anyone that's part of my Facebook group. Now, if you're not already a member, you are most welcome to join. Just search Facebook for the Mel's Yarniverse community group and you'll be able to become a member just like that. If you are already a member, you just scroll across the tabs at the top of the page, find the one that says Files, click on that tab and scroll down. Here you'll find a lot of really helpful and useful information, so it's well worth checking it out. And I will make sure that the charts that I've used today are available as soon as this video goes up. Just a quick safety tip: if you're planning on doing the burn test yourself, please make sure that you work in a well-ventilated space. So whether that's outdoors in the fresh air or indoors, please make sure you have a window open or a fan on. You do need to be able to smell the yarn when it's burning, but you don't want to be breathing in any toxic fumes. Always use metal tongs or tweezers to hold the yarn. And just remember, you only need to burn 1 to 2 inches of the yarn itself. You don't need to burn any more than that to do the test. Please make sure you keep a glass of water or some water close by just in case anything gets out of hand, and always be very, very safe. All right, guys, let's do this. Okay, so here we are all set up outside for our burn test. Now, as you can see, I have a non-flammable surface to do the test on. I have a cup of water close by. I've got my flammable source. I have a pair of metal tweezers to hold onto the yarn, and I have 3 different yarn types sitting here ready to test. They all have a different feel and a different look to them. Now, there are 4 things we need to remember to look for when we're doing the burn test. We need to see how the yarn approaches the flame. We need to look for how it behaves while it's burning. We need to smell the odor that's coming off the burning yarn. And we also need to look for what type of ash is left behind once it has been burnt. All right, let's start the burn test. So we have the first yarn here ready to go. Now let's see how it performs around the flame. Looks like it's starting to melt. All right, let's put it in the flame. Burning pretty quickly. There's a black smoke. And it's even sticking to the tweezers. It's melting. What does that tell us? It's definitely melting. It's not scorching, and it's leaving a very black ash. And it smells very chemically, almost like burnt rubber or burning plastic. Okay. I'm pretty sure that smells like an acrylic. So I'm pretty sure that white yarn is definitely an acrylic. I'll check the burn test chart and we can figure that out, but I'm pretty sure that chemically smell kind of gives it away. All right, let's start with the second yarn. Let's see how it goes approaching the flame. It's not igniting. It's not melting. Oh, there we go. It did ignite. It's burning very quickly. It's staying lit. The smell is like burning leaves almost like burnt paper. Yeah, it's like newspaper when you start a fire. It's turned itself off, so it's not continuing to burn, and it's got a very light kind of ash. I'll check the chart, but that seems to be performing like a cotton or a plant-based fibre. Okay, that's interesting. See if I can bring this ash a little closer to the camera so you can see it's quite a light ash and the whole thing hasn't burnt. So that's very interesting. Okay, get that cotton off. So now we have the third yarn. This is a little thicker, it's a little fuzzier, and it's much softer than the other yarns. Let's see how it goes approaching the flame. So it's not melting at all, and it's not igniting either. I can get much closer to the flame and nothing seems to be happening. So let's see how it burns. So it took a lot for it to start burning, and it seems to be self-extinguishing. It's like it's putting itself out. Oh, that smell. Okay, so that smell is like burnt hair. I don't know if you've ever burnt your hair on a curling iron or on a straightener. It's put itself out. So that's telling me that it's probably another natural-based fibre. I think this is wool. I'm just going to put it a little bit closer to the flame and try that again. So it takes a lot to get it to ignite. Once it ignites, it tends to put itself out. It self-extinguishes. Wow, isn't that amazing? Let's look at what's left. It's a very black ash there. And you can see that it's all stayed together like that. So let's put that down on the table. I'm thinking, yeah, there's that smell again. It's like burnt hair. Oh, yeah, it's pretty strong. So I'm pretty confident that that is a wool. So once again, the first one burnt very quickly. It smelled very chemically. And the ash is almost like a little bead that takes a bit to crush. This third one here, the wool, I'm pretty sure it's a wool. Yeah, see the ash just crumples as soon as you touch it, which signifies a pretty natural fibre. And the cotton was a very light, this is definitely a cotton. I'm pretty sure that's a cotton. I'm going to check the burn test chart so we can confirm, but I'm thinking yarn number 1 was an acrylic or some form of synthetic yarn. I think the second one was probably a cotton or a plant-based fibre. And I think this last one is definitely wool just because of that telltale smell. Oops, bumped the camera. Let's go inside and check the chart. Wow, wasn't that interesting? That was really amazing. What an eye-opener just to see the different ways that those different yarns behaved, not only while they were burning, but even before they were in the flame. It was really quite interesting. Now, I have some sneaky suspicions about exactly what types of yarn they are, so let's check the burn test chart to see if I was correct. As I suspect the first yarn may have been an acrylic or some type of an acrylic blend, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and just look at the acrylic column. So we can see that when acrylic approaches the flame, it fuses and shrinks away, which is exactly what it tried to do. Once it was in the flame, it melts and burns, and that's exactly what happened. It actually stuck to the tweezers, which was quite surprising. Once it was removed from the flame, it continues to melt and burn, which is exactly what happened. The odour is listed as chemical, and it absolutely did smell like that. It smelled like burnt rubber or burning plastic, so it was quite unpleasant. And the ash that it leaves behind is an irregular, hard black bead that won't crush. Do you remember what was left behind? I'll put up a picture so you can see. That's definitely an irregular, hard black bead. And it just stuck to the plate that I burnt it on, so not a very pleasant smell at all. Now, the second yarn was slightly different. Let's have a look. I was suspecting that it may be a cotton or at least a plant-based fibre, so let's check out what's listed for cotton and see if there's a similarity there. So for cotton, it scorches and ignites quickly, which is exactly what happened. In the flame, it burns quickly and there's quite a bright yellow flame, which is actually what happened. Once removed from the flame, it continues to burn rapidly and has an afterglow. That's actually what happened too. Do you remember? It was quite bright. The odour that you should be smelling is burning paper. Do you remember I said it smelled almost like burning leaves or burnt newspaper when you're trying to start a fire? That's exactly what it smelt like. And the ash that's left behind is light and feathery grey ash. This is interesting. The ash will be black if it's mercerized cotton. So there's a little bit of a difference there, isn't there? So interesting to know that if it's slightly light or grey, then it's 100% cotton or at least mostly cotton. But if it's mercerized, then the ash will be black. So that's really interesting. So for yarn number 3, I was suspecting it might be wool or maybe a wool blend. It definitely smelt. Do you remember the smell? It was burning hairs, which made me feel like it's definitely not a synthetic. It's got to be a natural fibre. So let's check the wool column and see what happens. So checking the wool column, when it approaches the flame, it smoulders and curls away from the flame or ignites slowly. And that's exactly what happened with this yarn. It didn't want to go up, and then when it did, it burnt quite slowly. So in the flame, it says, burns slowly with small flickering flame, sizzles and curls, which is spot on. Once it's removed from the flame, it ceases to flame. Do you remember it kept self-extinguishing? It wanted to put itself out. It didn't want to burn. That's exactly what we saw. The odour that we should be smelling should be burning hair, stronger smell than silk. So there you go. It's definitely a wool or at least maybe even a wool silk blend. Who knows? And the ash should be crisp, dark ash. Or you may end up with a round, irregular bead that's easy to crush. Well, the ash was definitely easy to crush and it was definitely black. So after checking the chart, I can be reasonably confident in assuming that yarn number 1 is probably an acrylic. It's definitely a synthetic fibre, and it was that chemical smell that definitely gave it away. Oh, that wasn't nice. Yarn number 2 is definitely a natural plant-based fibre because it smelled like burnt paper. And because paper is made from plants, you can see the correlation there. And yarn number 3 was definitely a wool or wool blend. It smelt like burning hair, which is definitely a natural fibre. I'm pretty confident that I have an acrylic, a cotton, and a wool here. Isn't that fantastic? Well, now we've been able to identify the fibre content of our yarn. Now I need to know what weight or gauge it is. Is it a DK weight, an Aran weight, a worsted weight? Is it 8 ply, 10 ply, 12 ply? Well, to figure that out, we need to do test number 2. Test number 2, the wraps per inch test. Now, the wraps per inch test is actually quite a simple test, but there are a few things you're going to need to do it. Firstly, you need a tape measure or a ruler. You're going to need something to wrap the yarn around that is the same thickness for at least a 1-inch section. And you're going to need a wraps per inch chart to refer to. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the chart I'm using today will be made available in the Facebook group, so you can download it from there. Again, if you're not on Facebook, you can do a search online for wraps per inch charts and you'll find them readily available online. Okay, let me show you how it's done. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you can use something as simple as a knitting needle. You'll need a tape measure to measure your 1-inch section to wrap your yarn around, or you can also find these things available online. Now, this is a wraps per inch tool, but they don't all look like this. They come in varying shapes and sizes, different colours. Some look like knitting needle gauges. Some are just little rulers that have a 1-inch section marked out for you. And basically, you use it to wrap your yarn around. This particular one that I'm using today was gifted to me by my lovely friend Kay. Thank you so much, Kay. She actually gifted this to me yesterday, and I hadn't even mentioned that I was making this video, so I was quite surprised that she thought to gift me something like this. Isn't that amazing? Okay, so I've got my spare yarn here. Just going to unravel some of that. Hopefully there's no knots in it. I'm just going to secure the yarn over here so that I can hang on to it. And then using my working tail or my working yarn, I'm going to wrap this yarn around this 1-inch section. I'm not going to wrap too tightly or too loosely. I don't want to overlap the yarns. I just want to wrap nice and evenly with a consistent tension that's not pulling too hard on the yarn. I'm not going too fast and I'm not leaving huge gaps. So I can see that I can fit that many wraps per inch. Now we just need to count them and see how many wraps fit in that 1-inch space. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I got 9 wraps per inch for this particular yarn. I'm just going to do the same thing on the knitting needle before we go and check the wraps per inch chart. So unravel that. What a brilliant little tool, by the way. Pop that to the side for now and grab the knitting needle. Now I'm going to do the same thing again. So I'm going to wrap the yarn. Again, we want to try and keep it as consistent as possible. We don't want it to be too tight and we don't want it to be too loose. We also don't want to overlap the yarn. So was it 9 wraps we got before? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now I'm just going to push that together without overlapping it. That's 9 wraps per inch. It looks about the same size. So let me just grab my trusty tape measure. And we need a 1-inch section. There we go. That's 1 inch there. Now again, that should be laying flat. It's a little bit tricky to hold it in place. There we go. So essentially, if that would sit flat, which it doesn't want to do, we can see that in that 1-inch space, we have exactly 9 wraps per inch. So we've got the exact same result. It's a little bit tricky because the yarn doesn't want to stay in place. But if it was laying flat like that, you can see that we've got a 1-inch space and 9 wraps per inch. So now we need to check the wraps per inch chart to see what that means. Now, looking at our wraps per inch yarn chart, I can see that if I scroll down to the 9 wraps per inch, that works out to be a worsted or Aran weight or 10 ply weight yarn. So I can safely assume that this yarn is a 10 ply or worsted weight yarn. Isn't that amazing? I love these simple little tests. They're just so simple but very effective. Now, once again, this test is not 100% foolproof. Different people have different tensions when wrapping yarn. Some might wrap really tightly, some might just be a little bit loose. And some yarns are kind of slightly different thicknesses or gauges, so it's not always going to be 100% foolproof. But it is enough to give you a general idea on how thick your yarn is, so you can then use that to work into your next project. So now we know the fibre content of our yarn, we know how to work out the weight or thickness of our yarn, but how do we work out how much yarn we've got left to work with? Well, for that, we're going to need test number 3. Test number 3, meters per gram. For the meters per gram test, you're going to need a few simple things. You're going to need a kitchen scale, a tape measure, a pair of scissors, and if your math is as good as mine is, a calculator. Now, this test is perfect if you have a bunch of these little balls or skeins rolled up and stashed in your yarn stash, and you just need to know exactly how much yarn you've got left so you can plan for your project. Now, because we don't have any specific information about the length or the weight of the yarn, we need to find a way to work that out. Now, the most simple way to do that is to actually measure out a specific length of the yarn and then weigh it to find out our meters per gram figure. Once we have that result, there's a simple calculation we can do to actually work out exactly how much yarn we have left in both meters and grams. Now, incidentally, this test also works if you're measuring in yards rather than meters. So if you're overseas and you're not using the metric system like we do over here in Australia, just replace meters with yards and the result will still be the same. Okay, let's do this. For this first part of the test, you're going to need your tape measure and your yarn. Now, what we need to do is measure out a significant amount of yarn so that we can weigh it on the kitchen scale. If you only measure out 1 meter of the yarn, it's not going to be heavy enough to register on the scale. So what I normally do is try to measure out at least 10 meters of yarn, and then I wind that up into a ball and I weigh the ball. So let's do that now. Now, this is going to take a while, so I'll come back to you once I have my 10 meters all wound up in a ball and we need to weigh it. So I'll see you in a sec. Okay, so now I've got my 10 meters of spare yarn all wrapped up in a ball. So now what we need to do is work out how much that weighs. So we've got our kitchen scale here. I'm going to turn that on and I'm going to weigh my 10 meters. And I can see on my scale, I don't know if you can see it on camera, but my 10 meters of yarn weighs 6 grams. Now, again, this will also work if you have 10 yards of yarn rather than 10 meters. You just weigh it and find out how much your particular yarn weighs in grams. Okay, so now we know I have 10 meters of yarn and that 10 meters weighs 6 grams. So to find out our meters per gram figure, you need our calculator. So grab your calculator and I'll show you what to do next. So with your calculator, you need to divide the total length of the measured yarn, which is 10 meters, by the weight of the measured yarn, which is 6 grams. So 10 meters divided by 6 grams equals 1.6. So that means for every gram of yarn I have 1.6 meters of yarn, or my meters per gram figure is 1.6. So with that figure, we can then go on to calculate the total yarn that we have remaining. I'll show you how to do that next. So for this next step, you're going to need the kitchen scale and the calculator. So all we need to do is measure or weigh the total remaining yarn. So this is the 10 meters that I cut off earlier, and this is the rest of the leftover yarn. So we need to find out what the total weight of the yarn is, and then we can find out what the length is. So by weighing it, I can find out that the total weight is 24 grams. So in total, I have 24 grams of yarn. Now, all I need to do is to multiply 24 grams times the meters per gram, which was 1.6. So 24 multiplied by 1.6 equals 38.4. So now I know both the weight and the length of my leftover yarn. Pretty cool, hey? We've been able to work out exactly how much yarn we have left over in that ball, which is fantastic. Now, did you know you can use a similar calculation to work out how much leftover yarn you have when you're working through different skeins and you need to know how much is left so you can figure out whether or not you've got enough left in that ball to finish your project? Well, let me show you how to calculate that one. Now, this calculation is going to be a little bit more simple because we have the information already. I know that this full skein of yarn weighs 2 ounces or 56.7 grams, and that provides 95 yards or 86 meters. So to find the meters per gram or yards per gram, we need to divide the total meters by the total grams. So the total meters are 86 meters. 86 divided by how many grams? 56.7 grams. And that gives me 1.51. So the meters per grams figure for this particular skein of yarn is 1.51. Now, to calculate the leftover yarn, all we need to do is multiply the weight of the leftover yarn in grams by that meters per gram figure, that 1.51. So let's see how much the leftover yarn weighs, and then we can work that out. So measuring the leftover yarn, I have 18 grams. So the meters per gram number is 1.51. We multiply that by 18. And I now know that I have 27.3 meters left of yarn in this leftover skein. Well, what an interesting afternoon we've had together. We used 3 simple tests to gather so much information. We can now use those mystery skeins we've got floating around in our yarn stash. We used the burn test to be able to figure out the fibre content of the yarn. We then used the wraps per inch test to figure out exactly what weight or gauge the yarn is. And then lastly, we used the meters per gram or yards per gram test to figure out exactly how much yarn we have left. And now we can go ahead and plan those fun new projects. Well, if you're still with me, then thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know down in the comments if there's any particular methods you're looking forward to trying. Are you going to go and dig around through your yarn stash and grab all those little mystery skeins out and try and figure out what they are? If so, please let me know how you go. I'd love to read your comments. I always love hearing from you guys. It's always a great experience. As always, I have to say a huge thank you to my channel members, my beautiful yarnies. Thank you so much for your support. You keep the channel going and you keep me motivated to make more content. So thank you so much. To anyone that's ever liked or shared one of my videos, thank you so much for your support. Each time you click like on a video, it lets me know exactly what kind of content you like to see here on the channel, and it helps me plan for future videos. So thank you so much for the feedback. All right, so with all that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Take care of each other and take care of yourself, most importantly, because you absolutely do deserve it. Take care, and I'll see you soon. Bye for now.